So this weekend we have this fight between Gervonta Davis and Hector Luis Garcia. It's been a little while since I've done a prediction of any kind, so I figured this is probably the most notable fight, or the first most notable fight of the year, kicking off 2023. So I figured I'd give my 2 cents, and yeah, let's break this fight down and pick a winner. This fight, to give you guys some context in case you haven't seen, at least in my opinion, is being treated as a little tune-up, a little run-out fight for Gervonta Davis ahead of the Ryan Garcia fight, or at least proposed Ryan Garcia fight. From what I've seen, the penciled-in date for that fight is mid-April this year, so another four months. And yeah, this is really a stay busy fight. I'm actually aware of who Hector Luis Garcia is, and I was aware of him before this fight was announced because I saw the highlights of his win over Chris Colbert. And Chris Colbert is another fighter who I was aware of. I've been aware of him for a few years. He's been a bit of a rising prospect, and Garcia secured a victory over Colbert, and that kind of put him in pole position to then go on and fight Roger Gutierrez back in August. And in doing so, in fighting Gutierrez, he won a 12-round unanimous decision and captured the WBA World Super Featherweight title. And you notice how I say super featherweight, because Garcia is not a lightweight, and I didn't actually realize this before, but he has never fought at lightweight. So not only is he going up against Gervonta Davis, who is, a formidable opponent, but he's also stepping up a weight class in the process. And so, yeah, let's talk about the ability of both men, particularly Garcia, because some people may be less familiar with him. Now, Garcia is a good fighter from what I've seen. He's a competent fighter. He's no slouch, not a slouch by any means, but he does have some considerable flaws, some gaping holes in his boxing game. And in the lead up to this fight against Gervonta Davis, I've been specifically looking at his performances against southpaws, and probably the most notable performance that I've seen is against a fellow called Isaac Avelar. And you can find this fight on YouTube, that's where I watched it. It's an 8-rounder. And when I saw it was an 8-rounder, I actually thought, this must have been one of his early fights. No, in fact, this is actually a fairly recent fight from December 2021. And in this fight, it doesn't actually say it on BoxRec, but Garcia was actually dropped early by Avelar. I believe it was actually in the first round. And the knockdown came about. It was, if memory serves me correctly, it was coming towards the end of the round. And Avelar managed to time, remember, both southpaws, Avelar managed to time Garcia over the top with a left hand and followed up immediately with a right hook and just put Garcia onto the seat of his pants. And that really, unsurprisingly, seeing a first round knockdown, sent alarm bells ringing. Not necessarily because I thought that Garcia would go on to lose the fight, but because I'm watching it through the lens, understanding and having the context that Garcia is now going into the fight against Davis. Because throughout the rest of the Avelar fight, Garcia showed a good amount of technique and skill and IQ, but it was still a somewhat rough fight where he had to ship a decent amount of punches, especially counter punches from Avelar, where particularly left hands over the jab, Avelar was able to capitalize with that shot quite a bit, but also the kind of sweeping right hooks. And both of those punches, but particularly the right hook, is really a money punch for Davis. Plenty of times we've seen him take guys out of right hooks. For a southpaw, he's two-handed. He has power in the left and the right, which isn't, I don't want to say it's rare, but it's not particularly common. A lot of southpaw fighters typically have an over-reliance on the left hand. But Davis definitely got two-handed power and has real power at that. Say what you want about Davis, but he's a legitimate puncher. And just seeing the lack of defensive responsibility from Garcia, because his technique is good for the most part, but it's a little bit loose. I feel there's some holes in it, particularly with his hand placement. He's no stranger to really staying in the pocket, and sometimes he will attempt to throw a shot, and whether it lands or it doesn't, sometimes he can be stranded, let's say, on the center line, and that's bad enough as it is, I want to say. But what makes it even worse is his hand placement. Is He usually keeps his hands around chest level, so his chin and his head are completely exposed. And I don't know whether it's a symptom of him maybe being a taller fighter. I think he's about 5'9" or 5'8", so he's fairly tall for lightweight. Maybe he feels as if he can get away with it because his head is higher up than his opponent's. But in the Avalar fight, at least, Avalar was more than is more than able to really capitalize on that and catch Garcia consistently throughout the fight. I think the problem with Avalar was he's just, I don't want to say he wasn't a puncher because he clearly showed that he could hurt Garcia, but I don't think his punching technique and his punching power was as consistent. Not to completely downplay Garcia's ability, he is able to, I feel like he does know his way around the ring, and this is someone who clearly has a degree of ability and some amount of pedigree. He's also got particularly good timing with his jab. The only problem is with Garcia, he clearly understands timing, but I'm just not sure if he's able to manipulate it enough. I'm not sure if he understands or has enough kind of a good enough understanding to consistently change his timing and change his rhythm to make it less predictable. Because he will throw in feints, lead hand feints, slipping feints to show different looks and mess with that timing, but he just doesn't do it consistently enough. And I think Davis, I've got some criticisms of Davis's ability. I feel like he can be quite lazy in fights and a little bit stagnant, not the most dynamic, sometimes a bit too reactive. But Davis has got good eyes, and he's in a lot of the time, I don't want to say all the time, but a lot of the time he is in position to throw a hard shot. We've seen that, especially in the kind of heat of the action. We've seen Davis really punch in between the punches of his opponent and catch him out. Makes him really dangerous. And I get the feeling he might be able to do that here against Garcia. So, to kind of wrap this up, I think from the opening bell of this fight, it will probably be a matter of time until Garcia gets stopped. And I don't see this fight really going that long. If you really press me, I think the fight probably ends in round 3 or 4. I think for a few minutes, Garcia might be able to use his size, use his length, because he seems to have a considerable height and reach advantage over Davis. Though I think most people do. Davis is built like a garden gnome. Very hard punching and athletic garden gnome, but he's on the shorter side nevertheless. Potentially he might be able to keep Davis at range and work his way around the ring, but I just think even if Garcia settles into the fight, he'll present a timing that's a bit easier for Davis to read. And then you couple that with the fact that Garcia isn't the most defensively responsible, doesn't always have his hands in the most appropriate place. I just think it's a bit of a recipe for disaster. And Davis, who is good with the left hand, is good with the right hand, especially the hook, I think he's going to catch Garcia. And as soon as he does, even if Garcia gets up, which he showed he can do, he does have a good degree of testicular fortitude, and he's got the stomach for a fight. He showed that against Avalar. I think it will just be a matter of time until Davis follows up and probably ices him completely. So yeah, that is my opinion on this fight. I think Davis wins round 3 or 4. I'm going for, and probably does so in devastating fashion. And I realistically see Davis, not that it really matters, but probably he can really take his pick as to whether he wins with a left hand counter or right hand counter. But I think it's going to be that kind of knockout nevertheless. Just looking at this card as a whole, to be honest, it looks decent. You know, got the main event, which is somewhat interesting to see how Davis looks against Garcia in the lead up to his fight with the other Garcia, which will, at least in my opinion and the opinion of many, be a much tougher fight for Davis. But there's also Jaron Ennis going up against Karen Chukagian in a welterweight fight for the IBF interim world title trinket. Yeah, we can forget that. Rashidi Ellis, who many people have forgotten, but I remember there were just highlights. It must have been a few years ago. I want to say around 2015. Rashidi Ellis, quite explosive, quite very quick, very fast twitch. Hasn't really done much as a pro. He's going against Roman Villa, 25-1 with 24 KOs, but I don't think he's fought outside of Venezuela, so that's never a good look. Oh no, he has in Mexico. Is that Panama? Yeah, I don't think he's a stellar opponent. But there's also Demetrius Andrade versus Demon Nicholson, another nondescript opponent. But nevertheless, there are a few names on this undercard. And hopefully they can produce some good fights. But for now, that is my prediction for Gervonta Davis versus Hector Luis Garcia. I think this will be the run out that we expect it to be for Davis. And as I say, I'm going for him in rounds 3 or 4 by knockout. Leave your take in the comment section below. And for now, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.